till the end?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just going to say, do you think the lights are off that resolution?
Yeah, sure, I'll do this.
Do you think you could-
Yeah. I'd like to ask Bill Code to come up. Bill's an anesthesiologist and he's a really close friend of ours. I think he's been a wonderful advocate for CCSVI and been very passionate in his pursuit to raise awareness and act as a resource to everyone with MS and CCSVI. And I think he deserves a warm welcome. Bill?
Fantastic. Hi, folks. And, feel free to go out to the bathroom. I've been there. Okay, I've had MS for 15 years. And since November 29th, when I had my venous angioplasty down in Newport Beach, my bladder's like it was 30 years ago. It's pretty exciting. So, Joseph has kindly agreed to be my techie guy. This is just as well. I'm in the mushroom position. I'm sitting here in the dark, just as many of us have been. I'm really excited to be back in Alberta. I, of course, did my anesthesia residency here, 83 to 88, including a couple of years of brain research as an Alberta Heritage Medical Research Fellow. So I know all about Alberta. Alberta's big times are back, which is great. Oil's $120 a barrel. So I'm here, I guess, relatively on my own nickel because I'm really passionate about this. I've been asked a while ago to speak, and we're going to tee up another conference later this summer or in the early fall. I'll be back again. What I want to talk about today, primarily, is what I learned when I went to the meeting in Bologna, Italy, 3 weeks ago. It was the 13th to the 15th of March, and the food was good, yes. So, you certainly know what CCSVI is. I'm happy to be the anchor. I'm not sure what he last said. I was just talking to a CBC interview, but fortunately, many of you will know now, both Global and CTV will probably have a piece on your 6 o'clock news tonight. The kicker, as always with news, is you're never quite sure. If there's a tsunami happens here this afternoon, it won't get played. So, what happens in CCSVI? There's primarily 3 veins. And we're without a pointer today, but if you look right at the top, you'll see the 4 blue pieces going up. It's the 2 inside blue pieces toward the middle that are the internal jugular veins, which typically drain the brain when we're laying flat. That's a piece of physiology I didn't know until recently. But when we're flat, almost all of the blood returns from the brain to the heart through the internal jugular veins. And the other piece, just to go back one, and the other part, when we're upright, it drains through the vertebral veins into the subclavian. So effectively, it could be those outside 2 pieces, and it also drains through the azygos vein, which you will see in that hook, the shepherd's hook that Joseph talked about, or I think azygos even stands for gooseneck, so it's got that bend in it. I want to mention those 2 pieces because that's often where the issues are. And we've heard a great deal about stents. You know more about stents than most every Canadian, including most of the neurologists. Thank you. Ask and you shall be, might be given. How do we turn it on?
Push the bottom. Push on the bottom and you'll get it which way it's going.
Okay.
And push it a couple times.
Okay. Help. I got the light.
Okay. It might not be working.
No, I've just got the flashlight
Okay.
so far.
Okay.
Anyway, if you get it working, I'll have a go. Okay. It's all about circulation. We've made a mistake in medicine. We've always talked about getting the blood there through the arteries, but we've ignored the veins pretty much because we said the veins will always come back. You can tie a vein off and the body will find a new way to get it back. However, if there's enough blockage of the veins and there's back pressure created or relative hypertension in the veins, then you don't get optimal blood supply to the tissues. And that's what's happening in CCSVI. So it's to assist recovery and for symptom control. I, as most of you know, written a book talking about pieces of the puzzle of the MS recovery puzzle, because this is a very big piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole puzzle, but it's a very big piece. So it doesn't negate any of the other parts. And I want to talk about it in symptom control. It's my suggestion that if we were under the care of cardiologists, we would have this now. Why? Because in the 80s, I was in Calgary, and the first two cardiologists in Canada were doing coronary angioplasty. Dr. Merle Knudsen and David Roth, okay? They started in Canada because that was a cutting-edge cardiology department. They were already, of course, doing angioplasty or doing cardiac catheterizations because we've been doing them a very long time. Unfortunately, our neurologist colleagues do not do procedures. I would suggest, though, in 10 years, already the neurosurgeons are doing this, and I met a brilliant young man from Buffalo in Italy, and he feels very soon the neurology residents will be training in this. This will happen. I hope we don't have to wait for all the current ones to die off, but some of them, that is the classic time for a paradigm shift. But a paradigm shift is happening faster today. If you looked at February 11th, Scientific American, it said social media is changing how medicine is practiced. And the example was CCSVI. Because us contacting with each other has made a profound difference. Last summer, I was just onto Facebook. I had maybe 2 friends. All 3 of my kids, and I'm worried about them, because they've got a high risk of MS. But they had 100, 150 friends. Well, they can't get over it. Now Dad's got over 900. And some of them are here in this room, and it's wonderful to put a person and a face with it, okay? So we want to talk about it for symptom control, because if it was for chest pain, we'd have it now, all right? And why couldn't we get symptom control if it improves our fatigue, our muscle spasm, our bladder, our bowel? Why not? Okay, so the symptoms that might improve: fatigue, headaches, I had those, brain fog, I had that, lots of it. And most of us do. I feel like a 15-year cloud's been lifted off my head. That's an unbelievable feeling. My speech is stronger and better. Some of you have noticed that and said to me on Facebook, because you followed some of the other talks I've done. But it's working, it's clicking better. You know, my repartee into a joke or anything else, way better than it was. It's great. Autonomic control. This one happens very routinely as well. What is autonomic control? Well, it's sort of the automatic parts of the body that the body does for you without you thinking about it. And one of them is bladder, and one of them is bowel. I've had bowel troubles to a degree, you know, the ability to control gas and so on. Some of us have constipation. Some of us, when we're really unlucky, we lose bowel control. Same with bladder, all right? For human dignity, to get those back, that's a powerful symptom control mechanism. Why don't we do that? The same part of automatic, of course, is temperature. The body tends to have us cool and shut down in the periphery. Once we're treated, almost always we warm up dramatically. I can never get any sway from neurologists, because I've been talking about them for years on this. I've seen 4 or 5 different neurologists. I started out with secondary progressive. I went to California because they sent me down to a hotshot there, and the efforts that wouldn't have to pay me insurance money. And he said I had primary progressive because all of my symptoms I'd never gone to a doctor about, so they didn't happen. Okay, cool. And then when I was in September, last fall in Buffalo, I was relapsing remitting. So I'm backwards. Muscle spasticity, I don't have to tell the folks with MS how big a deal that is. But if you can get it back, or get it recovered, and it goes away, it's gone. And it tends to stay away, unless we're having some challenge with recovery or recurrence. Balance, profound, you know, up and down stairs without the rail, the whole thing. Sleep disturbance. I was getting into a real issue with sleep disturbance. And that improved almost overnight. And the reason for that, I think, is the back pressure when you lay down flat, especially if your jugular veins are involved, the pressure builds up and the sleep is interfered with. The brain is not well. The brain likes to heal during the night. Gets us into a secondary problem. Some of us are going to end up needing to be gradually tapered off our drugs to help us with the sleeping. The new thing that we know now about sleeping drugs, like the Valium family, whether it's lorazepam or whatever what it is, mostly they work by helping us forget that we woke up. And other than addiction, they don't have any other guarantees. What outcomes can occur? Well, you know, slower or stopping progression, I think, is a very straightforward, logical one. But if, you know, many people have experienced return of sensation. I took my sister down to California 3 months after I went, so that was early, mid-February, and she was profoundly better. She had her touch back the next day. My hands and feet are still like wood, but, you know, that's a small thing compared to everything else. Reduced pain for some people. My neuropathic pain will not stay away unless I stay gluten-free. However, you know, some people it's dramatically reduced their pain. Improved intimacy, it's one we don't talk about very much, but if you improve blood flow throughout the body and you improve it in the genital area, then of course sexuality works better, all right? And the other part, of course, it's nice to make love and not be worried about muscle spasm in your leg or something, because it's a very big deal. And if any of you have been there, you know that. Reduced anxiety or depression. This one surprised me, but there's a number of young people that their people at their work cannot get over how much easier they're to get along with because they have almost no anxiety anymore. This is a double-edged sword. Those of us with MS, with anxiety, we're anxious about going for this procedure, naturally. And yet a lot of that anxiety falls away once you improve the blood flow. We're going to eventually find that this is a piece of mental health, mental well-being. Maybe even a piece of things like bipolar, but certainly issues of sadness and anxiety, which many, many people are on medication for, we won't need it. So, what about restenosis? It happens. We're going to get into it a little bit in a couple of studies. The very early stuff from Dr. Zamboni said maybe about half of the people will restenose their jugulars in about 6 months. Consequently, you know, we've been worried about that. But the early treatments, we were doing things a little different. We were leaving the balloons up longer. It doesn't help us, we know now, but we didn't know it then. And when you leave the balloon up longer, you take away the blood flow to that blood vessel longer, and you injure it a little more, and you're going to have a little more chance of, you know, injury to the vein and potential healing occurring and restenosis. When the body tries to heal that little bit of injury, it pours in inflammation. That's how we heal. Same as an outside incision here. That's why I'm very big on the anti-inflammatory principles to help minimize that. So now, we're rewriting restenosis. And the study of 150 prospective patients showed that it's about 9% at 4 months. That's a lot less, okay? And I would suggest you can probably even improve the 9% sum if you follow an anti-inflammatory regimen at least a month before and 3 to 6 months after, which many of you have read how I talk about that on my website or the National CCSVI Society website, or it's at Synergy as well, from Dr. Hewitt's site. So the larger balloons, diets and supplements are the difference. Now, that's the other thing. I wanted an example. This is a 20 millimeter balloon. We were not using larger balloons at the start. Okay? So what about optimal flow? Well, the first day in Italy, there's about 50 physicians and scientists got together to try and hammer out what would be the optimal follow-up and what would be the optimal way to do ultrasound echo Doppler. That will be published in the near future. Dr. Mark Hakey, you know, the Toronto-born physicist who works primarily out of Wayne State, Detroit, but also out of McMaster, you know, was very instrumental in this whole thing. He will be speaking at our National CCSVI Society conference September 10th in Vancouver. So we're going to have a meeting not far away in the moderately near future. He's working hard to put those pieces of the conference together and get them to the media, but get them also into the, you know, literature or press as a statement. That's going to give improved awareness, and it's going to get improved knowledge among the medical people too.